Hello children, welcome to SV Union High School and Junior College Pune. I am Deepa Fadke. We are going to learn 2.4 lesson The Fall of Troy from Standard IX English in this session. Let's start learning about the meanings. Epic means long heroic poem. Certain, sure. Arose, began. Compose, to write or to create. Wonder, roam. Hospitality, generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors or strangers. Great, brave, rich, prosperous, safe, well protected. Strong, well protected. Cunning, shrewd, pretend, fake it. Skillful, expert. Pursued, prompt, astonishment, great surprise. Dragged, pulled, tremble, shiver, voyage, a long journey involving travel by sea. Sacrifice, offering made to gods. Feasted, eat and drink sumptuously, soundly, peacefully. Rejoicing, celebrating. War, held. Leaping, towering. Armor, shield. So children, we finished learning about meanings over here. Now we are going to learn about the paraphrase. What do we understand from the story of the fall of Troy? Epics are long poems or tales which were passed from one generation to the other in the form of poems that relate the deeds of a great national hero or a great national war. Like the two Indian epics, Mahabharata and Ramayana, the two important literary epics of European culture are the Iliad and the Odyssey. The authors of these two early European epics are not certain. They arose and developed with the nation itself and were handed down from singer to singer till one great poet wrote it down. It is also believed that the Iliad and the Odyssey were composed and recited by a blind poet, Homer, who lived about 900 BC. Wandering in Greek villages, singing his poems. So he wandered from one Greek city or village to another, spreading his tales to the masses. So we are going to learn in this lesson. Rather, this lesson, The Fall of Troy, narrates the story of the fall of the city Troy, written in the Iliad. Now we are going to start reading part 1 and then we will learn about the story that takes place in part 1. Part 1, The Fall of Troy. Epics are long poems that relate to the deeds of a great national hero or a great national war. They often tell of a nation's early history. They may be composed and sung or recited for many years before they are actually written down. The two famous Sanskrit epics, which are known as the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the two great epics of European culture written in ancient Greek, are the Iliad and the Odyssey. Just as in Indian literature we go back to the stories from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, so in the literature of Western countries, they go back to the Iliad and the Odyssey. Just as children all over India know the names of stories of Ram and Sita, Yudhishthira, Arjuna, Draupadi, so children in Western countries also know the names of Hector, Odysseus, Achilles, Helen of Troy, the most beautiful woman in the world, because of whom the Greek and Trojan fought for 10 long years. And nobody knows for certain who the author of these two early epics is. It is thought that they arose and developed with the nation itself, and they were handed down from singer to singer till perhaps one great poet gave them their final form. So it is believed that the Iliad and the Odyssey were composed and recited by a blind poet, Homer, who lived about 900 BCE and who wandered from place to place, singing his poems to all who would receive him in their homes and give him hospitality. This wandering singer has been honored through the ages, not only in Greece but all in Europe, as the father of European poetry. So let's start learning about the tragic moments of the fall of city, Troy. The Iliad is the story of Ilium or Troy, a rich trading city in Asia Minor, near the narrow sea that leads from the Aegean to the Black Sea. It was well situated both for commerce and agriculture. In front of the city was the sea over which sailed the ships of Troy, carrying goods and grains. At the back rose the high peak of Mount Ida, from which flowed many rivers and streams. The valleys among the hills were well watered and fertile, with corn growing in fertile fields and cattle feeding on the rich grass of the meadows, where sheep fed on the slopes of the hills. So this shows that the city was much prosperous. Around their city, the Trojans had built a strong wall so that no enemy should attack them from the sea. The wall was so broad that people could stand, sit, and walk on it. The great gates stood open, and people could go to the seashore outside and come in as they pleased. But in time of war, the gates would be closed, and then the city was like a strong fortress, quite safe from all attack, protected by the walls surrounding it, as well as by the hills behind. So, there was also a big wall that was purposely, intentionally built to protect the city of Troy. The wall was so big that people could stand, walk, sit, and these gates of this great wall stood open, so people could go on to the seashore, they could come back as they pleased. But during the time of wars, the gates were always closed. Thus, Troy was a strong city, strongly protected by its walls and strongly defended by its brave soldiers. But all the kings and heroes of Greece had declared war against the Trojans, because Paris, a prince of Troy, had persuaded Helen, wife of a Greek king Menelaus, to elope with him. He had brought her to Troy. The Greek wanted to take revenge on Troy for the wrong done to Menelaus. They sailed to Troy and laid siege to the city. The Trojans too fought hard, and the siege continued for 10 long years. So children, you must understand over here. A prince of Troy named Paris had convinced Queen Helen, who was the wife of the Greek king Menelaus, to elope with him. The Greeks thus wanted to avenge their honor and pride. Troy was protected by the high peaks of Mount Ida on one side and a great fortress on the other side. Children, you can resemble the story over here. Troy, the city, the prince Paris eloped the Queen Helen, who was the wife of Greek king Menelaus. Same way as the story of Ramayana tells us that the wife of Sri Rama, Sita, goddess Sita, she was taken away. She was driven away by, you know about it, it was Ravana who eloped with her. But how the whole background, how the whole story gets developed around Lord Sri Rama and goddess Sita. So same thing has happened over here. Obviously, when the queen was eloped, when Paris, the king of Troy, took her away, obviously it was the matter of pride and honor for the Greek king Menelaus. So obviously this war continued for 10 long years. Days and nights, these two enemies fought against each other. The fighting went on daily, but the siege did not end. On the one hand, the Greeks could not take the city. On the other hand, the Trojans could not force them to sail away. Every day the Trojans came out of their gates, the Greeks came out of their tents and ships, and the fighting went on. Sometimes there were great battles between the two armies. Sometimes there were single fights between two great heroes. Sometimes the Trojans had the better of it and sometimes the Greeks. But still, the fighting went on. The Greek forces came in their ships and boats and set up their tents and camps around the Trojan fortress. And for 10 long years this war continued. Sometimes there were single fights between two heroes, sometimes the Trojans had the better of it, sometimes the Greeks. But this war did not end. Rather, this fighting went on. Great heroes on both sides were killed in the course of the war. After leading the defense of a city for 9 years, the brave Hector was at last killed by Achilles, whom none could resist. But Achilles himself was killed later on by a poisoned arrow that entered his heel, the only part of his body where he could be wounded. Still later, Paris himself was killed also by a poisoned arrow. The story again resembles to the Indian epic Ramayana. So then the Trojans were tired of being shut up in their city, and the Greeks were longing to see their homes again. But still the fighting went on. So, children, we understand here that for 10 long years, innumerable Greek and Trojan soldiers fought this battle every day. Many soldiers, many great heroes died each day. But the war did not stop, it went on. Towards the end of the 9th year of the war, Hector, who led the army of Troy, was killed by the great Greek warrior Achilles, the legendary warrior. Later on, Achilles himself was killed, and even the Paris, the prince of Trojan city, was also killed. But the war did not seem to be ended. It continued. It continued over and over again. Let's see what happens in the story in the second part of the second video session of this lesson. Till then, thank you.